I don't know if you heard, but some excitement happened last week. Some event that we didn't ask for or expect. And I'm just so glad that you're here. Last week, our worship service received a threat in email form. And we went outside to have communion while our friends who were caring and kind from the police department came and looked through our space and made sure we were clear and safe to come back in. We probably learned more about faith from that practice last week than we do from any reading, any book, anything that we've ever done. Because faith is a practice. Being together when it is hard and uncertain and unsure is a practice. Being there in the midst of people's grief and loss is a practice. And being there in a space of joy and compassion is a practice too. This week, after that threatening email, we also received a bunch of emails and texts and messages of care and compassion and gratitude. On that Sunday morning at the 9 o'clock service, our bishop stopped by to check in on us, and we also got to tell him about our great campus ministry. And why he should probably give us more money. Anywho. And then I received an email from the bishop of the Lutheran Synod as well, that they had heard and that they are here to support us with care. And then the Episcopal bishop was actually here at the 9 o'clock service. And I know him, and I was like, I know that guy, but I can't place him. And there are many things happening. And when he left, I hugged him, and I said, I'm so sorry. It's not usually like this. And he just said, Deborah, I'm just glad to be here. And he sent an email about how important and vital and essential this community is and for the work that we do, and his gratitude for witnessing the grace and the resolve and the resilience and the grit of this work. And so I give thanks for all of those messages. Not every bishop in the state reached out to us, but a few. And then on Friday, we were the main subject of the floor debate at the unicameral. How these bills that are being entertained give credibility and legitimacy to extreme violence and people who are filled with this fear and hurt who want to act out on it. It is a practice to go to the unicameral. It is a practice to show up. It is a practice to listen when people say things that are obviously not founded on any truth or any experience at all. And it is hard. That's part and all of why we gather. See, this community isn't born out of you needing to memorize a creed. There is no list of good and bad behaviors that I'm going to give you. We're not going to frown on someone for tattoos or anything else, which apparently gets frowned on. I didn't know, but it does. In a world where so many Christian churches look to absolutes, lists of rights and wrongs, things to memorize, who's in and who's out, we are in it for practice. And that is hard work. It is hard to keep showing up. It is hard to deep breathe and stay in hard spaces. And I'm so grateful that we could practice together this morning. And for all of the people who showed up all week long to be with us, give thanks. this part of our tradition that's about practice instead of a bunch of creeds and rules and rights and wrongs. That part of our tradition is probably what made the Gospel of Mary hidden away. Because her gospel is really about practice. It's not about absolutes. It's not about right and wrong. It is about this life of practice where you are so rooted and so deeply rooted in what is love and beyond the present that you can be yourself and not drawn off into distractions or hurts or old wounds or old things that sting, but you can stay present and be brave. And as Cynthia Bourgeault says, not float away into enlightenment, but be so enlightened that you are useful here and now. That we can make community better. This week and last week, I wanted to invite us to think about Mary's vision. She has this vision, and it's called a visionary recital when they share it. And so her vision is actually cut off. Like, how convenient. But she's not the only one to have a visionary recital. It's not weird or strange, and maybe it's not the way that you and I always experience our faith, because I maybe haven't been open to that. I'm not sure. But I want to share it with you because it matters for our understanding of who we are and how we are in this practice. Even Peter has a visionary recital. You can see it right there in the book of Acts, the sequel to Luke. Luke's a prequel, whatever. However you want to do. And so Acts 10, about noon the next day, they were on their journey and approaching the city. Peter went up to the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance, which I think means he fell asleep, but that's just fine. He saw the heaven opened and something like a sheet coming down, lowered to the ground with all four corners. On it were all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. And then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." And Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." Peter has this visionary experience, and then guess who knocks on his door? Someone who's not part of the Jewish tribe and tradition. The early church is grappling with inclusion. I guess it's a common theme. The early church is deciding who's in and who's out. They were all part of this Jewish tradition. Jesus is Jewish. He is rooted in the prophets and the poets and the Psalms. And there's this question about just how far that invitation can go. And so they have these visions and these experiences and these moments where they actually have to practice inclusion, and everybody gets upset and everybody gets uncomfortable and they start to worry and wonder about boundaries. Do people who become part of the way of Jesus need to change their dietary practices? Do people who become part of the way of Jesus but weren't already Jewish have to be circumcised? That's a big ask, I've heard. This is not good for growing a church. Such a high bar. Peter's vision gets shared over and over and over. It is a lesson to the church in the past, and it is a lesson to us today as they grapple with this space of inclusion. These visions challenge their understandings, and they grow out of them. Cynthia Bourgeault, who's a priest and a scholar, talks about where this vision comes from. This ability to see with the eye of your heart. To engage your heart, this other space of being, in such a way that you see something you couldn't see before. And that spiritual practice is about keeping that vision clear and open and ready to receive. It's called the nous, this way of seeing. There's also this other language that when someone is in that state of being, it's called the anthropos, or this single one. And when they say single, they mean like not into the dualism of the world. So like when Paul says there's no more male or female, Jew or Greek, slave or free, all these kind of dualities that separate us from each other, they don't matter. The single one, the anthropos, this one who connects so deeply. Cynthia Bourgeault says this is the condition of a heightened state of being. It's like having a higher level of octane in your gas. Being enlightened or single is a state where you can move through this world beautifully, bestowing, illuminating, enlightening, leading, and teaching because your heart and your eye of your heart is already stabilized. It's not about leaving this world. It's about being in this world with your heart planted in love so that you can be truly useful. Thomas Merton talks about this central place of nothingness that is everything at the same time. Sufis speak of this heart as an organ of vision, that in seeing and making sure the eye of the heart is clean and clear means that you can look through it whenever you need to. It means not being caught up by the traps and the tricks and the things that pull us and the egos that get bruised and all of that junk around us that takes our energy, that takes our time, that distracts us from where we really are. Bourgeault talks about this eye of the heart as where Jesus is and where Mary Magdalene's gospel is too, which is probably why we don't have her gospel. And the other gospels that weren't included in our canon, they all lean into this deep spiritual practice. This work on your own meditation, on your own well-being, your own effort to let go of ego, your own effort to kind of not be bruised easily, your own effort. And I tell you, that's a lot harder to sell. Like, it's a lot easier for the church to give a bunch of rules and regulations. It's a lot easier for the church to say, hey, memorize this creed and you'll be great. Or here, read these 5 scriptures. They're all you need. This is harder work. It is harder to support. It is harder to do. And it is way messier. How do you discern that a vision is one that is life-giving? How do you discern that a vision is one that makes us whole? These spaces of our ego, they can be tricky. And they can pull us off balance. The other thing about ancient folks in these readings is when they talk about passions and powers, they're not like, oh, he's so passionate, I'm so happy for him. It's like, oh, this passion that distracts you from your well-being. This desire to have more or to be a different size, or all the numbers that we get measured by in the world, to let those go. To just be centered, to be stable, to be whole. This work of becoming the anthropos, the single one, also gets sort of weirdly interpreted in the early church. Because somehow the early church, the Western church, the Roman Catholic Church, starts thinking of it as a single one, as in like Beyonce's all the single ladies, right? Like single means single and not looking to mingle. It becomes this work to elevate celibacy as the prime spiritual path, which is not something Jesus spends time talking about or elevating. This single one really means this one who encompasses all the being, right? There is no male or female. There is no Jew or Greek. There is no slave or free. There is no insider or outsider. There is no any of those boundaries that we make. There's this clarity and singularness in holding all those differences in one being. Bergeau names that Mary has done the work with Jesus. And that in what we learn from the Gospel of Luke, she's overcome those 7 demons, right? Luke loves to point out all the ladies following Jesus have overcome some demons. He doesn't say that about all of the men, which is why maybe they don't get it. And this sense that Mary Magdalene, the one called the Tower, has done that internal, hard spiritual work. And so I'm going to share the portion that we have of her gospel. It's not all available. Even though 2 have been found, the same parts are missing. So listen with me and we'll take this in for just a moment. And Desire said to the soul, I see you are descending, but now you are ascending. Like the being is getting away from what the desire had held them. Why do you lie, since you belong to me? And the soul answered, I saw you. You did not see me, nor did you know me. You mistook the garment I wore for my true self. You did not recognize me. And when it had said this, the soul went away, rejoicing greatly. Again, the soul came to the 3rd power, which is called ignorance. It questioned the soul, saying, Where are you going? In wickedness you are bound. But you are bound, and you do not judge. And the soul said, Why do you judge me, although I have not judged? It's naming that this force of ignorance is filled with judgment. And that the way it entraps us is when we judge others. It was bound, though I have not been bound. I was not recognized, but I have recognized that all is being dissolved, both earthly things and heavenly things. That's that singleness. And when the soul had overcome the 3rd power, it went and saw the 4th power, which took 7 forms. I mean, the soul is going through a lot, and we don't even have all of it. The first form is darkness, the second is desire, the 3rd is ignorance, the 4th is excitement at death, like an unwillingness to understand mortality. The 5th is the kingdom of the flesh, this willingness to control other people's being for yourself. The 6th is the foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the 7th is the wrathful wisdom, this inclination to violence. These are the 7 powers of wrath. They interrogated the soul. Where are you coming from? And where are you going? And the soul answered, What binds me has been slain, and what surrounds me has been overcome, and my desire has been ended, and my ignorance has died. That's the final remark. Those are those 7 demons, those 7 difficult spaces. You can understand this when Jesus encounters other people who are possessed, like the man possessed by a legion of demons. Before that, he is wild and reckless and not himself. And after it, the scripture names he is in his right mind and he is seated and in control of himself. He is in this stable, centered place. That is the work of our faith. That is the practice that we engage in. And I want to leave you with this quote from Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. The powers of the ego, the 7 powers that have moved through and in Mary's gospel, are about power over. But this language, this vision, is about power with. It's about love that comes from understanding, the worth inherent in being human, the love that comes from experiencing that. Every creature exists in and with each other. Act and God acts. This is a living exchange, a constant dialogue, a mercy. Who are we to disregard that voice of love? May it be so.